Okay, thank you for tuning into Stampscaping 101. This is the final stamp sketch piece from a video 2 or 3 videos ago that I did to showcase this figure right here for someone that requested it. And when I do those stamp sketches, it really, after I do them, I really feel like finishing them off. So this is the third in that trio, and I don't know, we kind of created this real kind of foggy passage of light in this scene. I used a lot of pigment ink down here, but for the most part, it's just kind of using gray tones like this, and then going over it with some alcohol inks and variations of blue values. They're real subtle, but it has a little bit of a cooler tinge to it as a result of that. A little bit of green on these islands right here, that one, this one, and this one. It's very pale and dull, kind of in the spirit of this scene, though. And that's where alcohol pens do come in handy for that. But anyways, it's kind of a minimalist approach, but I think it looks fairly, I don't know, complete in terms of the overall look. And I don't know, it was fun to do. So anyways, thanks for tuning into the channel, and hope you enjoy the video. Okay, let's finish off this final stamp sketch composition featuring the woman in coffee, the lady in coffee. I wanted to do something a little bit different on this one. Just from a coloring standpoint, I was thinking about kind of a theme, a mood to try and set. I've done a lot of scenes using the got a little speck of gray from this pad here, but anyways, I've done a lot of sunsets using these island stamps here so far since they've been released, and I thought I would try something a little bit different with them. And I was thinking about, well, I mean, I have done this kind of foggy inlet, but I was thinking about doing something like even foggier, okay, and more muted. Okay, let's go with some gray. I just re-inked my gray pad, I think probably for the first time ever, because I couldn't even find a gray pad. I mean, a gray re-inker. So I just opened a new one. Luckily I have some of those in stock still. So I'm just going to drag from the outside in some gray ink, okay. Marby inks are they're thicker inks, so this is kind of grabbing my paper quite a bit. But I'll just try to manipulate it a little bit more than kind of your thicker inks. And what I mean by that is I'll try to just get what I'm going after in repetition. And what I mean by that, going, for something in repetition, it just means to kind of stay in one area. So I'm kind of adding some ink on the outside, and I'm dragging it in through repetition, and the ink isn't, it's not going to have a chance to give me some kind of undesirable mark, like, the shape of my applicator, whatever applicator you happen to be working in. So if you just keep it really light in touch, okay, but you just kind of keep streaking it in, dragging that color in like that, really lightly, okay, it'll give you that nice transition from wet to dry and dark to light, like that. Okay. Alright, this is a number 12 gray from Marvy. It's a little bit darker than what I thought. Maybe there was some black in here. I know I used blue on here before too, so I didn't even wash my my tip off, so I just went with it. Which I often do, you know, unless, you know, all of my tips are just completely saturated with ink, and, you know, I want to go with like a yellow or something like that, then, you know, I'd certainly clean off the tip before taking it into the scene. Kind of creating this little passage of light, huh? That's the thing about creating lighting. It just means that you're simply retaining some of that light. Now, where am I going for these colors? Well, I'm just, in general, I'm kind of creating a darker perimeter. As I take it in, my drag kind of mark gets tapered because it's going from wet on the outside to dry on the inside. One of the things I'm also doing is I'm kind of going on my edge of my applicator tip, okay? Like this. As opposed to this, okay? Less surface area on here gives myself a better chance, okay? So see, I can even do it on a piece of dry, just plain copy paper, okay? If you just kind of take it nice and easy, don't try to, you know, go like that, you won't get these, you know, undesirable marks. You'll get this nice tapered application of ink. You just kind of have to stick with it too, you know. Stay in one area and just kind of drag it in. And I mean, this, you know, starting off with a color that's, you know, fairly dark in value. It's not real dark. It's like a 50% gray, I would say. You can really kind of establish your lighting very quickly, okay? And this is just going with one color. When I start off really light, you know, it takes me, you know, a few colors to get into it before, you know, kind of the lighting scheme really starts to reveal itself a little bit more. You can kind of see the lighting scheme even with the lightest of tones, but it's not quite as apparent, just simply from the very nature of using a very light value first. Now, I don't happen to have a lot of values of gray. I have this one that I'm using right now, and I have the Memento London Fog. My London Fog is getting a little bit dry, so, you know, I'm just not using that. So you can see strategically it's not always just about, you know, choices. It's about kind of whatever I have on hand and just making do. You know, which I guess is a good exercise in itself. You know, you just kind of, you know, if I didn't have gray, I wouldn't use it. I would probably use a black or something like that, and just use it kind of diluted, and then, you know, what's kind of a lighter shade of black, you know, lighter value of black would be gray, right? If I really wanted to go with gray. Okay, now the perimeter is getting fairly saturated with ink. Let's drag this one in a little bit more. It's kind of creating a little bit of a shadow at the base of all these islands, okay? So I'm kind of adding more and kind of bringing in this kind of tapered streak of color just to kind of ground those objects a little bit more. Maybe that one kind of in the distance there, that really distant island. Okay, let's see. I think that's about it. I mean, you could really, this could be, you know, the final color that you use too, if you wanted to. In terms of your coloring process, toning process, whatever. Okay, let's go to black. Same black that I stamped out my objects in. Okay. And I'll add a little bit more. Again, you know, just using kind of the edge of this applicator, like that. See, it's getting a little bit darker there. It kind of makes that island, I think, a part of, you know, that setting, the, you know, it puts it into that surface, you know, of the water. And that, what I mean by that is it's creating a shadow, so it's saying that it's kind of a part of that environment when you know, you have something affected, you know, something very close to it affected by, you know, its very presence. So say without that shadow there, it's like a, you know, it's like a vampire or something like that, you know, it's just, you know, it doesn't really exist, you know, in terms of its reflection. So we need to give that surface some of the, if not the reflective quality of it, at least it's where it's casting a shadow into that surface, okay? See, it doesn't look like it's kind of sitting in that water now a little bit more. You're saying that it's opaque, and then instead of transparent. Okay, there's another one there, that shadow. And the darker the shadows, the lighter the light areas are going to seem by contrast, okay? And the shadows up here in these distant islands, I'll make it just kind of really thin. What it looks like when I'm doing is just kind of like that right there. Making a little bit more of a stronger kind of horizontal streaks, you know, to go along with this, you know, water type of theme here. kind of dreamy looking. Just the overall look. Let's go back with some more of this gray. Sometimes I go back to my lighter tones just to kind of mellow out things a little bit more. You go light, then work dark, then go back to the light ones. Just kind of streak that in. You know, this has some black in it now. I didn't switch tips. I'm still going with the same tip. Kind of made this area a little bit darker right back here just to bring out this little highlight right here on this bluff. Okay, let's try something here. Let's go with a really, really pale blue. Let's see. This is an aquamarine. Here's a blue-gray. These are just alcohol ink pens, which you probably have in your collection. Pale blue. Ooh, that one's really... that is not a dry pen, it's just so super light in value. On camera, though, it doesn't even show, but in person, I'm telling you, I can barely see that. So, that's a good one to start off with, you know, just to see if you know, if you can see anything. Okay, just kind of tinting. It's kind of like a photo tinting, you know, those old color, what are they called? Kind of photo coloring kits, you know, they were all very, very pale versions of whatever hue they were, you know, so you can kind of tint, you know, black and white photos. And that's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of taking a monochromatic, you know, there was a little bit of blue in there, but, and we're just going in there and tinting it a little bit. Okay, I think that was the pale blue. Let's try the blue-gray. This is a shuttle art one. I always start off in kind of the darker areas, you know, where I won't be able to see too much of that color, just to kind of get a feel for it. Alright, let's go to the aquamarine. I have a feeling this one will be a little bit more visible. You know, you might be able to just do the whole scene, you know, with pens too. You know, there's certainly no reason why you can't. Okay. Fairly light in value as well. Let's do something. Let's add a touch of warmth down here to this grassy bluff. It doesn't have to be grass, you know, but see that right there? Is that visible at all? It's very pale green. Let me see if I have another one. Huh? Oh, that was melon. Okay, this one's pale green. I was thinking there's a pale green. What was the previous one? Ooh, that is really light. It's almost yellowy. It's really barely visible. Let's see. Here is a Canaro. I'm trying to find a really good green here. Here's a Shuttle. Well, this one's pale green. Here's pale green from Shuttle Art. And here is the pale green from Marvy La Plume. Quite different, huh? This one doesn't even look green. I like it, but boy, it is so light in value. Okay. Pale green Shuttle Art. Kind of left a couple little blobs there, so that kind of darker one. I mean, it's okay, but let's just kind of blend that out with a, the lighter tone. Alcohol inks kind of go back into solution when you go over them with another color or like a blending tool or something like that. Anyways, a little bit of a slightly different color glow. No, this doesn't look too bad. I actually kind of like that. Let's put some of this green down here on these other islands where there's a little bit of illumination on them. It's kind of just a tinge of color. I don't have it very bright, at all here. So I'm not going to make the distant ones brighter. I'll have to be as dull or, duller, kind of less visible in terms of the color brightness than the foreground, just because of the distance that's coming into play here. Alright, so anyways, it's kind of a moody scene. This looks like more like the area that I grew up in, the Central Coast. It was always kind of foggy at the beach and cold and windy, Here's another green here. Ooh, that one's really bright. Let's get a little bit of it in here. It's super bright. I don't like it like that, but kind of add that in, and then just go back, with your lighter tone, and blend that in a little bit. Just kind of spread it around and dilute it somewhat. And it looks okay. Alright, big question is, what color should she be wearing? Let's go with a real muted, kind of a violet, I think. I think it would go well with that green, that violet kind of green, combination that you see in a lot of, I don't know where we see it. We see it in, I've seen it around a lot. I don't know, in decor, I guess, for the most part. Alright, that one's a very pale one. That one's called Periwinkle. That's the Marvy La Plume Permanence. Alcohol inks do not smear, dye-based ink applications underneath, so don't need to worry about that. Salvia blue. Let's go back to the periwinkle and blend out a little bit. I touched that, and the alcohol ink is so sticky to the touch, that gets. Go a little bit more violet here. Or a lot more. Okay. It's a little bit too bright though. Let's go back and mute that out a touch. Spread it around a little bit. Yeah, maybe she's coordinated, you know, in terms of color. Put a little bit of that tone into her hat. Okay. A little bit of slight color to her hair. I don't like that color too much, so I'm going to mute that out and just kind of spread it around as well. Kind of vary it a little bit. Okay, that looks okay. A little bit of brown in that hair as well, perhaps. All right. She has a nice view. What time of day it is, I don't know. I still have that little dot of color right there. Doesn't really bother me, but I'll mute it out a little bit. We'll go with the Hero Hues. Alright. Pigment ink. I just found like 3 more color box frost white pads in a storage box. Probably used to go around to the different workshops with me. I have no idea if they're, I didn't even test them to see if they're wet or not. Been sitting around probably out there for years and years. I don't know, 10 years probably. They might still be wet. The pigment ink really, I don't know. It seems to stay moist forever. At least around where I live. If you're out in kind of more arid, you know, areas, then maybe not. Okay, I'm adding this down into my lit areas, okay? And then I'm working, you know, out a little bit, and I'll try to taper it where it's, you know, there's a kind of a thicker application of it in the lighter areas, and then as I move away from it, I'll just try to taper it off a little bit. So we'll go from light to dark, as opposed to working from the outside in with colored inks, going from dark to light. Okay, so light to dark, and colored inks, dark to light. It just, I don't know, it just, this adds a little bit of a different feel, okay? So let's say this little island down here is in the light area. So just kind of, you know, kind of putting it in a little bit of a lit situation like that. It also kind of gives it a little bit of atmosphere and mood, you know, it's saying that there's probably some fog and moisture in the air. You know, like that. And it just makes the object seem a little bit more dimensional when you light it, if you're able to. And in order to be able to light something, okay, you have to have the area next to it light, alright? If everything was like completely dark, it wouldn't make sense to put this kind of this, you know, this lighting over the top of it. So see right here, behind this island, we have that little bit of light, right? So what I'm doing is I'll just go in there like this and bring some of that light, or I guess it's kind of illuminated mist or something like that, moisture in the air. Okay, and suddenly you have this island that's, you know, it's not only lit, but it's kind of enveloped in a bit of illuminated moisture, you know, fog or something like that. And that's kind of a really easy way to kind of add mood into a scene. See that right there? So it's not just these crisp, you know, islands anymore, which you want, you know, in your impressions. But now they are somewhat more of a kind of a three-dimensional form, and I don't know, there's kind of dimension to, I guess, the space between objects. So it's like us as a viewer and those objects down there. We're putting something in between that, rather than just nothingness, you know, like air. Okay? But you're putting moisture, you're putting suspended particles in the air. If it was a sunsets thing, it, you know, might be like illuminated dust in the air. You know, if you're in Los Angeles, you know, back in the, more so like back in the 80s and 70s and 80s, you know, it's a lot better now, I think, with the regulations, but smog, illuminated smog, making, you know, for some really beautiful sunsets, you know, all that illumination of that pollution in the air. Hey, it did make for some really nice sunsets. I wouldn't want to go back to that, but alright, so let's put a little bit on top of that one as well, like that. See that? It has a different mood to it, huh? It's kind of a smoky feel. Not quite sfumato, you know, like in oil paintings or something like that, but it's, I don't know, there's something kind of, you know, nice about that look in terms of, I don't know, maybe the texture of the objects. If you notice, I'm kind of tapping it with my finger. It kind of pushes it down. It kind of spreads it around. You know, it removes some of the ink that's been applied. Because inevitably, sometimes, you know, when you're tapping around like this, you know, there's, you know, it's in this cotton, and it, you know, you don't get quite, you know, the application that you want, but it's easy to manipulate the what you lay down after it's been laid down, you know, just by tapping on it, or, you know, you can do it with another Q-tip or something like that. I just use my finger. See, that's right, it's giving me a little bit of a texture that I don't really want right there, right? I don't know, I think that stick part of this is starting to get smashed down too much, so the stick is probably kind of poking down there a little bit too much. But kind of, okay, that's a little bit better. Kind of reshaped it, but, you know, I'll just kind of tap this around like this, and, I don't know, not quite finger painting, but, you know, something akin to that, I guess. Sometimes the objects farther back in the distance are a little bit more obscured. Like that. So this will look a little bit more like a painterly, you might say. Okay, so I'm going to put that down there like so. It kind of looks like it's, you know, like farther back in the distance too, you know, having kind of our objects kind of obscured like that. They're kind of a little bit less in focus, maybe too, or something. Let's take a look at the sailboat down here. The sailboat, let's treat it in similar fashion, okay? See that right there? See how that looks right there. Let's put this in kind of a little bit of a fog as well. Sailboat has to be very careful. You know, maybe it should drop anchor until that fog kind of lifts and you can see a little bit better. Or maybe as modern navigation and that. Keep it away from the rocks for sure. Add a little bit more than I think I'll need because pigment ink dries darker than how it looks when it's been freshly applied. Okay? And if you ever apply too much, you know, there's no point in time that you can't go back and change it, because even if this dries, you know, the pigment ink, if you don't like some area, you can just take a paper towel or Kleenex or whatever and just buff it right off. It'll come right off if it's on the glossy cardstock. Not if it's Brilliance, though. Brilliance ink dries very hard and firm on glossy cards. I would imagine matte cardstock too. And you can't spray seal this or something like that, you know, with acrylic spray and expect to be able to manipulate it either. So, you know, just do it at any time after it's been applied or after it's dried, you know, as long as it hasn't been kind of changed. I'm putting a little bit of steam coming off of this coffee cup right here. Okay. Alright, oh, I left a mark here. This alcohol ink is still real sticky down here. Okay, let's see. Let's put a little bit of fog. Let's say it's kind of creeping over this bluff right here. So I'll put it a little bit over her shoe, right on the top ridge line right here. Putting a little bit more light out there on the horizon. I really like that sailboat down there now. It really pushes it out there into the distance. Yeah, by putting that pigment ink over the top of it. Remember, it was stamped out in black, so now it looks like, I don't know, like a 30% gray or something like that. But it will seem a little bit darker, like I said, when this pigment ink dries. I don't know how long it'll take. It's a little bit thick through here, you know, maybe an hour or so. Okay, I'm really enjoying putting some over my islands right out here. It's really kind of obscured a lot of them. There's different kind of ridges in these islands. I'm just kind of putting some kind of this fog back in that ridge, you know, these slopes, okay? That is new. I haven't done this before. I haven't come into the those little ridges. That was really good. It kind of makes sense, you know, how the kind of that moisture would go in such a kind of a terrain or shape. See, I kind of put it in, you know, in the, not the valley, but, I don't know. The space in between the ridges. I don't know what area of the island that would be called. Alright, boy, that was a lot. What a pigment ink. It's a very soft look for sure. I really like it. Okay, here's some little bit of a gel pen work. I won't add too much because I don't know. I don't see this being kind of that sparkly surface texture. You know, where you would see kind of, you know, little speckles of light, but maybe we can add a few just for, I don't know, kind of details or something. Those subtle little marks, you know, that, you know, might look good here and there. So I'm kind of adding it in lighter areas and kind of tapering it off a touch. Right in here. Taper it out like that. I won't go too far into the, you know, the darker areas where that dot, you know, the dots will stand out too much. I put a few over that little smudge, you know, when I was re-inking. There's some little kind of lit areas on my island stamp designs, and I'm just reiterating just a little touch, just saying, okay, there's a little bit of light hitting those areas, so I'm just kind of reiterating it. Kind of like this area's lit right here. There's, you know, areas within there, the islands. Okay, so maybe I'll put some up there as well on this one. Maybe it represents lighting. It could, you know, be little tiny flowers or something like that. Maybe I will give it more of a kind of flower type of thing. Little white flowers kind of clustered here. kind of brought that little area to life, but you know what? As I was doing that, the thought occurred to me, what might look really nice is something to match that kind of violet top of our star of the scene. And that is a little bit of this lavender Sharpie paint pen color. Put a little loop in or something like that into this grassy bluff here. Yeah, that kind of tied it all together. It kind of gave another reference to that color. See that right there? It's kind of a fun little touch. Okay, let's see. This is a Uniball Signo. Let's use this one right here. Let's add a little bit of variation. These two the same. Oh, these are the same, I think. Violet, violet. I don't know why I have two of those. Okay. Let's add that into that as well. So that looping isn't so monotone. All right. It's a small detail, but it's kind of fun. Right, so see those little flowers that there kind of relate to our character right there. A little ridge line is kind of alive with flowers, but kind of go back like that, and that area in there becomes like a whole different kind of look and area, but I think just having a tinge of green back in the distance on those hills is enough to kind of make it relate to this area in here. And gray, you know, that's been used throughout up there, is in this nearby grassy bluff as well, so similar textures in terms of the white gel pen are up there. And they're also here, representing both lighting and, I don't know, floral textures or whatnot. So, I think it relates enough, but there's enough separation in terms of the distance, because after all, this area down here is supposed to be, you know, quite some distance away, you know, especially those distant islands. But even that sailboat right there, you know, it's, you know, I don't know, 200 yards away, whatever it might be, something like that. So, enough separation, yet enough similarity to tie the two, you know, regions together, I would say. Anyways, that didn't turn out the way I was thinking at all, but that's why I kind of never go into these scenes with anything too definitive. I expected it to be a little bit more airy and light, but that value of gray, the Marvy gray, was darker than kind of what I was thinking about. Maybe especially since I just re-inked it, so you know there was a lot of it. But anyways, I do like it. I like what's happening up there. I really like that kind of the mood, you know, that this whole passage kind of came out to be. Pretty easy color scheme, you know. Two versions of gray and a little bit of blue mixed in with it, and then just kind of play around with your if you have some really light versions of pens, you can use them. You can use dye-based inks, or like I used, you know, just variations of different values of blue and gray in that water as well. So had I not used it, I don't know if you can tell too much of a difference because those colors are so subtle, but they are fun to kind of play around with, and you can get these kind of real light tints, with this huge variety of values that these alcohol pens come in these days. So, and I don't know how valuable some of the really super light ones are. They happen to be the ones that I use a lot. But if you have kind of your brighter tones that would stand out more, when you're in terms of your coloring, you might want to think about, just picking up a real cheap set. These pens right here are, they're double tip. There's a chisel and, the kind of the fine tip one right here. I'd prefer more of a brush tip, than that one right here. But it works perfectly fine, and these pens are like, 50 cents each. And they seem to be quite loaded with ink, and the ink is just fine to work with. So, for scenes like this, it's perfectly good. I don't know how much of a lavender tone I would be using over the course of time, but when the pen is so inexpensive, I can have a nice range of values with each given hue. So, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks as always for tuning into the Stampscapes channel.